minutes.
Okay,
That's
circulated. Excellent. Great, we're like chugging through this agenda. Has everyone gotten a chance to look through the
I didn't
minutes?
actually share it, I think we look at the minutes.
Move forward, okay, we will do a double approval of the minutes next month. That will be for July's meeting and August meeting. We can skip on to regular business. I don't have a president's report tonight, so I will pass it to Tom.
My report is extremely brief. We are extraordinarily busy. This is a summer that again are seeing record numbers. And in your folders, there is a report that I asked Elizabeth to write using statistics. She did it quickly and very well. And I think it illustrates the fact that that our programs are receiving high attendance both here at Maine and at Huguenot Children's Library, both for children, for teens, and for adults. So things are going well. We're given the record heat wave, we've been serving as a cooling center too as well. And it's been a good summer, an interesting summer. Yes,
Okay, that's okay.
that is it.
Short and sweet. We're going to move on, Tom, to the New York State Library Construction Grant requests. And I have the resolutions here.
Thank you, and I appreciate everybody being here at this August meeting. Once upon a time, it wasn't the norm, but since we started to immerse ourselves in applying for New York State construction grants, August seemed to be the opportune time to go through the process of obtaining board approval. And so we have two grant requests before you folks, in the description of the Huguenot Children's Library grant and the Maine Library grants are found in your folders. And I just want to start with the Maine Library grant. As you folks know, we have been talking with the board about this grant request, and this is an exciting one because we're dealing with an issue in the building that began when it opened, and that is the issue of noise and reverberations. This building won AIA, that is to Architects Award, when it opened in the late 70s, and it was a beautiful building and very ahead of its time. But one of the issues that the architects did not consider was the fact that with this open building with the many atriums, there would be significant noise reverberation, which would allow for noise to travel throughout the building from other areas. And that's been a real problem since, as I said, since the beginning. And so we thought it was the opportune time to address this problem. We searched for vendors and found a vendor that was fully willing to take on this project, take form. And so if you look at the description, we had this company with their field tech do measurements, and they provided us with a price quote to create and install these noise reverberation elements throughout the library, which will greatly reduce the noise so that people can come to the library and maybe not experience the extremely quiet library of yesteryear, but yet a more quiet place, so that they, when they need, a more quiet environment, they can find it. One of the things that we thought was really interesting is that the material that they're using is green, it's recycled, and so that we thought that was really a terrific feature. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I want to make sure that what I'm reading is the background is context, right? But I don't see in the agreement that the company.
I'm not hearing you.
I'm sorry, the company name.
Take form.
And the work we're doing is installing noise buffers?
They are going to be, the creation of them custom to fit all our areas in the library and then install them.
What do they look like?
I have a picture if you'd like to see.
Yeah.
There are tiles, and I can show you the areas where they'll be going. So, I can send it to Beth, and then you can drive it around. It'll be it'll look to some degree like an art, like a fabric, but they'll be attractive looking, and yet they'll also be functional. So we have the sort of the intersection of form and function.
I was just looking at these and realizing how similar they look to the Lincoln Center's variable acoustic paneling that gets deployed depending on what use is happening. So if it's like a film movie or a rock show or the orchestra, use very similar materials and hang down, and they are, it's like you want them under certain circumstances and you don't want them under others because they really go for sound.
Right. So they're movable?
Yeah, well, I don't know if they're movable, but they can't, these don't look like they are.
They are not, they're permanent.
Okay.
Yeah, the ones we're doing have employability, but these are really in place permanently.
I mean, you know, what's so interesting is that we had a really difficult time finding a vendor that would take on this job. We asked libraries, and most of them were like, we can't find anybody, but if you can find a vendor who's willing to take on a job of your size, we're interested, particularly Austin. We had a small library and Purchase reached out, and she said, you know, we're using Tapeform and they're really terrific. So we, after having spoken to at least half a dozen vendors, you know, who would come or said we need a large amount of money to measure, Tapeform came in. I'll be honest with you, they're one of the most professional organizations that I've dealt with. They're very organized and thorough and thoughtful, and they spend a lot of time measuring, and we're really excited. This staff is excited because, I mean, you know, when we have events in the lobby, the noise will drift up. When there's activity in the teen area, it will move from one place to another. So by doing this, we really think we're making the library, you know, a more appealing place for everybody. Because one of the complaints that we've received over the years is the library's too noisy. I can't study here. If I find a study room, it's okay. But if I don't, it's just, it doesn't work for me.
I see. So they're installed on the walls and in these different areas.
Yes.
I understand. So they absorb the.
You will absorb the sound. And they're green too, which we really loved.
And there's no budget in this. Right?
No, I have the amount here and I can share that with you. Thanks. The total cost of this project, everything inclusive, is $303,494.19. We are allowed by law to apply for a grant, 3/4 of that amount, which is $227,620.64. We are considered an economically disadvantaged community, so our grant match is not 50% like many other communities here in Westchester and throughout the state. Our grant match is 25%. If we're lucky enough to be able to get the grant fully funded, our match will be far less. Our match with that amount would be $75,873.54. And you know, the formula that we've followed previously with the majority of our grants has been to go to the foundation and ask for that match as part of our overall grant allocation for that fiscal year. And so I've already spoken to Chris Ellen about it, and you know, she understood the situation. And, you know, she thought that the foundation, as in previous years, would support this. Now, if we happen to get less than that grant amount, which is possible, Though this year, thanks to our legislature, they overruled the governor's recommendation and created a capital fund, for construction projects that's really extensive. Westchester will see $1.6 million go to it, which means all the libraries that apply, will do a competitive grant process. There'll be a group of library directors who are not applying for grants, will use criteria to make decisions about awards. And then from there, we'll go to the WMS Executive Board. Francis, of course, sits on that board. We've been very fortunate in the most recent years have been able to get full funding for our grants. We're not quite certain what will happen this year, but we're hopeful. However, if we do receive a partial amount and it's not something that the foundation can sustain, the really positive feature of this project is we asked them to break up the quote into areas. So we could choose area A, B, and D, which would allow us to do that, to do what we need to do. Right. Which was the technique that we chose to use when we applied for the second floor grant. It was a large amount of money. We got a very nice award, but it wasn't the entire amount. So what we decided to do was exactly as Whitney said, was to phase it. So we chose certain elements that we thought were important, put it in that first phase. The foundation provided a match, we completed that. Then the next grant round arrived, and we applied for the second phase, and we were really fortunate. We received full funding for that. So we received the 75% of our grant, and the foundation provided that final quarter. This year, the grant that we're waiting for that still has not arrived due to COVID. Apparently, there's delays in Albany with the dormitory authority, etc. We applied for a grant that was fully funded, 75%, which was $341,000, and the foundation will be giving us the quarter match, which I believe is $114,000. So.
Do you want to make the resolution about this? Does everyone feel comfortable? Are there questions? Any other discussion?
I just have another question. Is it like full walls or just?
No, portions of the wall, not every wall. And what they've done is they've measured and they found the areas where the sound will reverberate most, and oftentimes they're higher spaces, etc. And so that's what we're going to do. However, in the third floor grant that we're due to accept in the near future, one element that we did include in that grant was to encapsulate the team area from the third floor and really essentially close up that atrium, only because the teams are boisterous, and we're really, as much as possible, not trying to tell them to quiet. We want them to be able to feel like they can function there. So that space will be enclosed, but it will not handle everything.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good, so just want me to read this?
You want to take that?
Or want to do it?
I can do it.
Okay, go for it.
I'm asking the board to consider making a motion to agree to the assurances as stipulated by the New York State Education Department in relation to the New York State Library Construction Grant application for the main library, New Rochelle Public Library Noise Abatement Project. Could I have a motion?
I have a motion.
Thank you, Lucille. Is there a second?
Good, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? No, good, so that resolution passes for that part.
We have got two more
Yeah.
as part of the process. I'm also asking the board to consider making a motion to submit the Smart Growth Impact Statement as required by the New York State Education Department in relation to the New York State Library Construction Grant application for the main library, New Rochelle Public Library Noise Abatement Project. And,
So assuming we submitted that, then that's part of this grant
Right.
application process, yes.
which we've done every time that we pass.
Excellent. Can we get a motion? Great, a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, that part passes, thank you.
Thank you. A final one for this one. I am asking the board to consider making a motion that would declare that the main library New Rochelle Public Library Noise Abatement Project qualifies as a State Environmental Quality Review Act secret Type 2 action, thus classifying the proposed restorations and use of the above land as requiring no further review under SECRA and its implementing regulations.
Great. Can you make that motion? As Tom stated, and we have a second. Excellent, again, thank you, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great, so this secret portion passes.
Thank you, Lori. Appreciate that. Let me then bring you to the next grant application, which by the very nature of the building is smaller in size and less in cost. And just to note that the New York State Library grant application process allows a library system to apply for a grant for each building in its system. So what we've been doing is throughout the years applying for grants for the main library for needed improvements, enhancements, and we follow that same strategy with the Huguenot Children's Library. And so well, I will share information about this grant, and you will also find the grant application there in your packets, the narrative that is. In this instance, we are continually looking at the Huguenot Children's Library because it's a well-used library, and it's a building that was built in 1869. Its function was to serve as an ice house adjacent, relative to the lake that was adjacent to it. And the city took possession of it in the 1920s. It then came under the auspices of the New Rochelle Public Library. It functioned as a branch, full-service branch, both children and adult, up into the early 90s. And then due to a very serious budget climate where funds were just not available for the city, the library saw a significant cut in its budget, and the painful decision to close this building was made. And so the building was left to sit there, historic, beautiful building, prominent area in the city, and the city was not paying attention to it. So it was starting to fall into a state of disrepair. However, a group of civic-minded citizens had a vision of bringing that library back online, and as in this instance, make it a full-service children's branch. And so these folks pulled together, created a 501c3 organization in partnership with the Huguenot Children's Library, and started fundraising, and also actually did a lot of sweat equity. And they brought this building that was in disrepair back into really great shape, and the handover was made to the library in the late 1990s. And since then, we have been running that as a full-service branch for our children, and we've been funding it. And even though our partnership friends brought the building online, they did a good job, and the building has stayed intact, but there are some changes and enhancements that we've had to make. One of the issues that we found has become a real significant problem is storage. And we have not just books that are in the library, but all sorts of supplies, particularly relating to programs and technology. And when the partnership reopened the building, they opened it as they knew it. And what's happened is, particularly on the third floor, if you've been up there behind that desk, it's really a mess. It looks poor. I mean, it doesn't look professional. Things are scattered every which way because it just hasn't been a plan. And the closets are just sort of closets. And so what our idea was to take this deficit and make it into a positive and create storage for that space. And we brought online a contractor who we have worked with, and he worked with Susan Moorhead, who is our branch children's librarian, and came up with areas to improve the storage and also to fix the electrical elements there. We have just a few outlets, and so it's kind of a gerrymandered configuration with a couple of multiple cord things where things are plugged in. We want to make that safer for everybody. And one of the kind of cool things that we're trying to do with this is to try to be environmentally conscious and save money. Now, in this library, when this was opened in the late 70s, there was an extraordinary amount of millwork that was done, oak, and also a lot of heavy oak furniture. And our custodians have really, they're very thoughtful and they save things, and they have saved a lot of the oak. And so what we've been able to do is to connect with the contractor. He's going to use quite a bit of the oak for the shelving and closet upgrades. He will sand it and refinish it, and again, save a lot of money. So that's really the third floor, or this, the first floor, or the second floor, which is the top level. The first floor, it's just a minor improvement that we're looking to make. When you enter the library, there's a circulation desk to your right, and you'll oftentimes see these bins, these gray bins, and they're from the Westchester Library System. And basically, they're transit bins that our staff will put books in there, not going to us because our custodians move them here on a daily basis. Somebody's returning a main library book at HCL. But if somebody from Peekskill drops a book there, or for a patron of ours borrows something from Yonkers, it gets returned to HCL, which happens actually quite a lot. So there's bins filled with books that are going back to other libraries. We're going to build a receiving station. It's fairly minor, it's not very costly, which will sort of organize it. It will make it safer. It won't allow kids to be able to stumble across it or open it up. So that's what we're doing there. Now, the sort of the final element is the lower level, and also the wall adjacent to the lower level that opens onto the patio. In the lower level, you folks might remember there was the lake behind the high school overflowed, and it actually damaged the library. Just the lower level, the water flowed in. It really didn't cause horrible damage, but the flooring that had been there for about a dozen years, which is sort of a multicolored tile, started to lift, and so we felt that we needed to change it. And so one element of this project there is we want to replace the floor with something a little more suitable, a little more able to sort of handle the activity that goes on down there. The other thing that we want to do is, because our programming is becoming even more and more important, the kitchen that the partnership built was perfectly fine, but it was a very small sink, and we're finding for art projects and other sorts of things, we want a bigger sink. And so, and we also need a nozzle that will get in the way when people are putting things. So what we're trying to do modestly is to replace the sink, replace the nozzle with sort of a gooseneck, and we don't want to replace the cabinets. We think we can sort of reposition them and sort of refinish them, and so that's what we're planning to do there. Now, the final element is the wall that's adjacent to the patio. So if you walk out from the lower level, you see the patio before you, and look to your right or your left is this wall. One of the things that the library staff have been doing during the summer is encouraging art expression by using that wall, and it's not working out. So what we'd like to do is replace the masonry, which sort of needs replacing because it's quite old, and cover it in sort of like a blackboard type of paint that we understand can be used so that kids can almost use it as a chalkboard. So those are the components of that. Now the budget for that, as I said, sorry.
What is the material that you want to replace the first floor flooring with?
I can tell you that. I think I got it in my. You mean the lower level?
The lower level.
Right, we want to, I thought I brought the. There it is. What we're planning to do is to remove the linoleum tile from the floor prior to floor installation. We will be preparing the floor, which includes diamond grinding, having all the grinders hooked up to vacuum. The system minimizes the dust. Make minor repairs to the concrete using menders and fillers to fix the minor pits and minor cracks. Then what we're going to do is mix and apply a Pentec 100 solids, self-priming, pure polyurethane base coat, broadcast chips to be included there to provide texture and color. Once the base coat is fully cured, the floor will be scraped and then vacuumed to remove any loose or vertical flakes. Then we'll finally apply a UV stable polysubcardic final clear coat with silica sand for traction. That's a lot.
So is it kind of like a polished concrete?
Yeah, in a manner of speaking.
It's a polished concrete, so it's like a less fancy, like a terrazzo or something like
Oh,
that.
similar.
Yeah, where you pour it.
This is the contractor's description. You got
I
very
have a
specific.
question about that floor. So are we sure that it's not, are we sure based on the history of the building that it's not asbestos or what type of linoleum?
No, because-
or?
No, because that's a good question, Daniel, because probably about 14 years ago, we redid that lower level. And so I don't believe there was any abatement because I think over the years, the floor's been replaced on a repeated basis. And so I can tell you that the floor is, 12 to 14 years old, so it's pretty safe.
I think the work was done, it was in the 90s when they asked, it was like decades ago.
Right. It might have been, I'm not privy to this, but if there was asbestos, it might have been done when the partnership took on the responsibility of rehabbing that building.
Quick question, and that is, the floor was damaged because of those heavy rains. It is likely that we will get heavy rains again. So are there considerations for any kind of flood to
Flood what, I'm sorry?
okay, mitigation?
Like it rains.
Thank you.
I
Because we
think
could put a floor down, but if we get heavy rains again, and it's gonna damage one.
we thought this kind of floor, if there was a damage, that it would sustain far less. There wouldn't be any tile coming up or anything like that.
Floor itself,
But
They're
if
drained.
the water was able to come in, so then what's being done to prevent that?
properly towards the door, are there drains?
Right.
There are
Stilts for shelving?
There are drains, there's some shelving down there, which is really good. But it will be tilted towards the floor. The irony is with the current configuration, it's set that way because we, after this happened, Susan, who was the librarian in charge at the time, notified us. We went down there and the floor had, the water had come in, but it had drained away very quickly.
Okay. So it sounds like there is some things already being done.
Had been done
Able
previously.
to drain, where we know in high school that was not the case.
Right, and our goal was not to put down a flooring, as you said, that it seems like an inevitability that at some point in the future, at some point in the future, there will likely be another incident.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I'm pleased with this grant application. It's very efficient, and it seems like it'll make some nice cosmetic improvements and functionality improvements. You haven't told us how much it's going to cost or what we're requesting, but it sounds just like very reasonable upkeep of a beloved space. So thank you for that.
Thank you. As I said, the scope and scale is so much reduced to the main library. The total cost of the project will be $48,760. A match of 75% will result in a grant award to us at $36,570. The remaining 25% will be $12,190. And what we're intending to do is, again, as part of the foundation grant process, we'll be asking for that money from the foundation. And as you folks know, each year when we go through the process, the staff come up with projects, we vet it with you folks, and it goes to the foundation for their final approval. And when the partnership was folded into the foundation and their funds were essentially folded into the other account separately, there is a separate, literally a separate grant proposal for the Huguenot Children's Library. And so it's actually, I didn't say it in public, but it's extremely generous. I mean, so we're quite comfortable that we can, with this small amount, we can afford to make this request and continue to program great programs like the summer programs that we're seeing now, as well as the year-round programs and some other small upgrades that happen. It might be technology, it might be our furniture recovery, that sort of thing.
Any questions about this? Are you ready to move to the resolutions?
Mine was on the back side of this.
Yeah, when's it gonna
timetable.
start?
Yeah.
And when was that?
So, I'm sorry.
The start date, it
Oh,
says
Susan didn't put it.
start dot dot dot.
Right.
Yeah.
This is a really easy project to start with, unlike the main library, which once, well, first of all, I should just say, we never start a project until the check from the state arrives, just because who knows, if something will happen. Like this year, we're ready to start moving with the air conditionings at HCL and the third floor, but if we were to start earlier, we could be in financially in an uncomfortable position. As far as this project is concerned, if this year is the outlier and we receive our grant monies in September of 2023, we would expect, having given the contractor notice, that we could likely look to start sometime in November or December. December would probably be a better time, right, quickly. Because as you folks know, in December, people's minds turn towards the holidays, they're not using the library as frequently, it gets quieter, so those are really good times to do projects like that. So that would be our intent. And since a lot of what we're looking to do is not tied to some of what we think, that supply chain delay, we're feeling pretty comfortable that this could move forward in a fairly timely manner.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I can do this once again, so I appreciate your patience. I would ask the board to consider making a motion to agree to the assurances as stipulated by the New York State Education Department in relation to the New York State Library Construction Grant application for the Huguenot Children's Library Improvements Project. Thank you.
Can I get a motion? Great, thank you, Lucille, a second? Well, you're already written in here, Daniel, so thank you. Can all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? No? Good, then that motion passes.
Thank you, board. Next motion. I would ask the board to consider making a motion to submit the Smart Growth Impact Statement as required by the New York State Education Department in relation to the New York State Library Construction Grant application for the Huguenot Children's Library Improvement Project.
Make a motion, somebody?
I'll make a motion.
Ryan makes a motion, you get a second? Second. Corey? All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent, that was Rhiannon and Corey, thank you.
Third motion and final, and thanks for your patience. I would ask the board to consider making a motion to declare that the Huguenot Children's Library Improvements Project qualifies as State Environmental Quality Review Act (SECRA) Type 2 action, thus classifying the proposed restorations and use of the above land as requiring no further review under SECRA and its implementing regulations.
Motion,
I'll make a motion.
Beth makes a motion, we get a second?
Second.
Lucille seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No, then the motions pass.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks, and our library patrons, thank you.
I'll keep you posted just as a sort of a complete picture. These grants will be submitted by Jean, who does a wonderful job pulling it all together, getting the documents, using the online portal, and getting documents ready for Whitney's signature as well as mine. The end of August is the deadline. The Library Directors Committee will be meeting over the course of the month of September in order to make their recommendations. And at that point in time, if there are issues with the grants, Elise Burke, who's the WLS amazing administrative assistant who just handles all the minutiae here, will come to each library and say, we have a question about this, does this really work? That sort of a process. And hopefully we'll be told we've got a full award. And if we have it, then we have to make a decision about how we can phase it. And then ultimately, the directors will make a formal recommendation to the WLS Executive Board, which Francis sits on. The board will meet in late September, early October, and then they will make a decision, or make the recommendation, which is usually what the directors have recommended. And then it will go to Albany for a protracted period of time where there's analysis. And of course, what happens in Westchester happens in the city, happens on Long Island, and all the rest of the state. So there are a lot of grants that they all have to do.
Thank you.
And I will keep you posted when we hear all of this.
Thank you, Tom. Great, so the next item on our agenda for tonight is picking up where we left off last month, discussing our main library fire stopping project. I'm just going to give a quick recap of the big picture for our newer board members and for the public. This, I think it was in 2019, we put an RFP out for a consultant to conduct a building audit for us. Haven't done one in 10 years, and 10 years. I don't recall how long it took, several months to complete that building audit. It was then completed. It was presented to the Buildings and Grounds Committee and to CROP, who are a larger expanded version of that committee with members of our community. Walked through, it's a 400 page document with a lot of items listed that needed attention, and understandably, we asked for a summary of the most critical elements of that, the action items that we wanted to address so that we knew which ones to prioritize, because the entirety of the list would have been prohibitive, financially prohibitive. Amongst the top components of actions that we knew we needed to take was this fire stopping project. We prioritized the non-sexy stuff, the safety stuff, the most essential components of making sure our library is a safe and comfortable place to be. So this is one of those, very critical projects. We took action to reach out. Tom reached out and worked further with our kind of longtime partner, Architectural Preservation Services, to get a quote for those services. It came back to us, and the original amount, to remind us, Tom, was.
Sorry.
Okay.
The original project amount was $183,000 in total. And once again, we submitted our application to the Westchester Library System. The year that we submitted that grant was a year where the legislature had failed to override Governor Cuomo's fairly minimal recommendation regarding New York State Library construction grant money. So instead of a $1.6 million county award, which we're looking at this year, it was an award that was just a little bit short of $700,000. So there was less money to go around for the libraries that were looking to do projects.
And that was still in 2019?
That was 2020.
That was early 2020.
It was August 2020. So when the grant went to the directors, they were confronted with a problem that we haven't seen recently, but we had seen it early on, which was they had more grants that totaled a far larger amount than the money that was available for the county, and that's including the 50 or 75% match. So what they decided to do was to come up with an equal dollar amount for projects, and they gave us $61,000 out of that $183,000 project award, which meant that we, the library, had to find $122,000. The board at the time made the decision to accept this, again, this project with less money, use the fund balance, which was pretty robust, because they prioritized, like we all did, the idea that the building needed to be as safe as possible for its residents, whether it be staff or public or everybody else. And so that was the scenario. And then following that decision, we waited for Albany to go through its gyrations. Ultimately, we received the grant for the money, and then we asked Doug Avilio to start the process of analyzing this project and doing a more in-depth analysis of what needed to be done. Prior to this project, they did an analysis, but they didn't open up the entire building. By taking the time to go through everything, they determined that the original project had increased in scope by probably nearly 200%. So it was far more work than needed to be done. We were confronted with this and were really obviously disappointed. And so at the last meeting, we went to you folks to ask you to help us meet the gap. And the gap was the new project total, and this amount, I just want to caution you, is on the high side, because if you looked at the documentation that Doug sent, he did a range, and we decided to be conservative and expect the worst, but maybe hope for something better. So the total project was $276,000. Now, of course, we had the 61,000 as a grant, and the board had previously approved 122,000 as part of that initial grant prospect. There was a gap of $93,000 that we needed to fill so that we could fully fund this project. And at last month's meeting, I asked the board to consider providing an additional allocation from the fund balance of $93,000 so we could close the gap and start work on this project.
So, do we have our fund balance tonight at all?
No, but I can tell you that we last year ended pretty much on an even number, so we did very well last year.
Wait, can you give
I don't have a number, I don't.
a rough ballpark?
Well, we were at 1 I want to say 1.8 last year, and we're going to stay where we were from last year.
So we have and everybody, and maybe everybody doesn't remember, or just as a refresher, our fund balance is money that doesn't get used during the course of the year, but over time, so it's not a huge chunks of money, because as a nonprofit, obviously, we basically spend what we bring in, right? Sometimes it doesn't happen, or, money doesn't get spent, and put that money into a fund balance, and it's used for things very particularly like this: emergencies, capital improvements, unforeseen circumstances. Our van breaks down, we need a new van. That's an example of a recent use of our fund balance. Puts it to good use, obviously. So this is a very appropriate use. It's a kind of a critical path item that we want to address. I encourage my fellow trustees to ask questions and get comfortable with what's going on.
Just so you know, our audit starts next week, so sooner rather than later, we'll have a complete idea of where we ended this past year.
Okay, thank you.
But it looks good.
Yeah.
It looks really good.
And in the grand scheme of things,
We have a nice contingency.
Right, it's a nice contingency. So, any questions, and thank you for filling in the kind of history of, I had forgotten the part about that being a year. And also let's mention the fact that this was, now 2 years ago, but COVID was happening. This wasn't, a full building at the time. Everyone's energies were being used to try to figure out how to operate a library during a pandemic and serve the population outside of the building. Our building was ostensibly shut down for that time period, and fire safety in the building wasn't at the top of our minds. It is again. There is an emergency. People are using the building more. Every month we hear more and more people are coming in. So that is why we're now returning our attention to this. Because of that, we started paying attention again and asked Doug to do a more intensive cost estimation. That's what this is the result of. So,
Can I just answer a question?
Yep.
The timing, so we received the grant, we submitted the grant in August of 2020, we received the grant this same year, but then, again, the pandemic is kind of being put on the back burner. The more in-depth analysis that was done this year.
Right, the grant was approved, Lucille, in September/October of 2020. The grant money didn't arrive until, I think 2021 September, October, G, sometime around there. And then we notified Doug and asked him, we'd like to start. He had some other projects in the hopper ahead of us, and he did ultimately start. And he spent time, not just with his team, but actually our custodians once again really stepped up and really provided a lot of assistance in terms of sort of opening up the building and allowing them to do a more in-depth study, which the determination was made that the original estimation lowballed what was actually necessary to make the building safe. And
costs have gone up in the last couple of years. We all know that, and particularly in the construction world. So I would hesitate to say lowball and misunderstand that.
Right.
It could have been very on point, and it's just the pricing has gone up. And I will say there is a range within the first 20 pages of that 753-page document. That is a differential of about $40,000. So this is the high end of 207. Yeah, so while we may have asked for your approval, for our approval of $215,000, it may well be less than that. It may be $175,000 when all is said and done.
And it just shows that there was, the phase one scope of work was just the assessment, correct?
yes.
There was not yet phase two.
I'm sorry.
The phase 2 is over.
Phase two, got it, okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you for carrying so much. Like, this is important stuff that we all need to understand. And this is, where we are right now. This is our building. We need to take care of it. We need to take care of each other and our community. So I feel good about asking for your vote to pass, to move forward with this. Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
Do we have an idea of when phase two, when the work would, do we have an idea of when phase two, the work would start?
I think when I last spoke to Doug, I believe that they might start, once pending approval by the board, that is, that they might start within a 2-month time period, and they expect, unless there's a surprise, that it could be completed fairly quickly within 6 months. One of the interesting things that's happened as a result of COVID, and Jean could tell you chapter and verse, traditionally grants would come in for a 3-year time period, and the clock would start ticking the day that the grant arrived in the building. But because of COVID, so many projects have been delayed, whether because of finding personnel or the supply chain. A law was just recently passed that now gives libraries that receive grants 5 years. So we have plenty of time before the clock ends and we're in jeopardy. So, but we would like to see this soon as possible because A, it's a matter of safety, and B, frankly, the longer we wait, the possibility that the price could be higher. And Corey knows in your work that things have just really gone up.
So I know last time we left off, you talked about a project manager. Did we get a project manager assigned?
No, we didn't. We were hoping that the third party that would be evaluating the work that has nothing to do with APS and the team that would be coming in. And that's not an insignificant cost. That's $14,000. So we will have somebody separate to look at the work and make sure.
That's included as
That's part of it. Right.
Part of that. Yep. Anything else? No? Good, well, this isn't an insignificant ask, so without further ado, I will ask the board, I will make a motion that we approve the expenditure from juncture, from what we know, $215,000, give or take, based on the range and, the market. That is my motion, and I'm gonna second. It's, so it's a $276,000 total, but it's we already have the grant that is 61.
What's already,
We have
Yes.
22, we just need 93.
So it's 93, I'm sorry, okay, so we already approved the 100 and, got it, I'm sorry. So we already approved the 122, so the remaining differential is the $93,000 from the fund balance. So I will rescind my request for a motion of $250,000 expenditure from the fund balance and re-put forth a request that the board approve expenditure from the fund balance of $93,000.
We're going to give you a paper to sign later.
Yes.
We'll have the numbers on.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, great, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No, great, thank you. So we will get started now with this fire stopping project. Thanks for.
Thank you, board.
Yes, thanks for your work on this.
I just have to note that we have done a lot of projects over the years, and this is the first project that has surprised us and came over. So this was not something that we're used to, but we truly appreciate you investing your time and energy considering this and allowing us again to make the improvements we need to make for this building so that it's safe. All the cosmetic things are great, but
Yeah, it's important work, and we appreciate the content. The background content is helpful too.
Essential, yes, thank you. That concludes our regular business portion, and because this is a typically short meeting in August, we don't do committee reports unless anybody has anything to say. Speak now, we're moving on to public discussion. Thank you, Jessica. Marjorie Sachs? Guys, I didn't really need to read that.
it was a nice ritual.
I was just going through the motions.
So first of all, I just want to really appreciate Mr. Giuffino for all these grants that are going out and just how you've been doing this through the years. So it's been such an incredible thing for the library.
Thank you. It's really, honestly, it's a team effort. The staff as a whole have really gotten involved in all of this, but thanks.
So I appreciate the staff as well and for approving these projects. And I really also want to appreciate the focus on the environment and the marine aspect of the sound proofing or whatever you want to call it, as well as the human children's library, that you're really being resourceful and using things that you have already. And I just feel like you are, as a board and as a director and the staff, that you are a model for the city. And I really want to spread the word that you are really working at doing things great, because it's not necessarily happening in the rest of the city with all the development. So please spread the word that you are doing this and that you're committed to that. And I also just want to say that I have heard recently from so many people in the community how much they appreciate the library, and especially during this heat with the cooling, and it's just, I mean, it almost brought me to tears to just hear people saying, we love this library and we love everything about it. So I just wanted to give you that feedback as well.
I think we can all agree that we love the library too, and thank you for saying that, and it feels really good to hear it.
And I think the staff is so, when you work in a place, our staff believes in what they do, and we have such a great public, it's such a positive, symbiotic relationship. It's really great, and it's kind of cool. I say this to the staff, we have new opportunities to change things, new things, new programs, we're working on grants that we hope to be able to announce that are really sort of exciting. About the sewing machine, we've got the first year, and so we're working towards starting on that. And there's some other grants that I'm hoping that we'll be able to announce that will be just, it's exciting, essentially, to work in a community like Rochelle. It's a real privilege.
Can I just make one note before we adjourn, that I think it's also important to just acknowledge the staff for the wonderful event that they hosted this evening, this afternoon, into the evening, and it was delightful to walk up to this library and hear this wonderful music that was playing. Kids were still out there enjoying themselves, and the picnic party in the park, yes. So it was just really wonderful. I mean, we saw the tail end of it, but there were still a number of people out there. So.
You know, and again, what we do with a lot of our programming is, it's not just us, it's our partners. And the New Rochelle Business Improvement District, the BID, they're our partners with this. And, you know, Carol Lippman is the executive director. I was out there talking with her, looking at all this stuff. She said, take those fans, bring them to the board. I said, we'll do. It's a little perk.
Take them outside, yep, and we could just acknowledge the bid, as you said, Business Improvement District, the Friends of the New Rochelle Public Library, and then the Parks Department, so they've all been involved with that, and partnerships are where it's at. And I will just say, last week I couldn't get into my Libby account, and I called the library, first texted Tom, and he ignored me. Right thing to do. It's fine. And I called the library, and they just helped me in this way, and I was very enthusiastic texting Tom, never mind, but I had this feeling like I wish all of my problems could be solved by the library, because she was just the loveliest, and it was just delightful, and so thank you, Marjorie, for making us gush, and we should do it more often. Any other, what's that?
So Tom and I came here to sign, but then the Irish Day was here, and that was, I mean, it was packed in here. You know, that was standing.
Almost, you're right. It was the Irish step dancers.
And
And this week it was Asmara, who is a Middle Eastern dancer with a band. It was packed. And what was really cool is that the audience is totally diverse. I mean, different ages, different neighborhoods, different ethnicities, etc. It was really kind of fun. It was fun. It was good.
Keep a comment. Any other comments? Great, then I will make a motion that we adjourn for the evening. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Good, thank you.
Thank you, Warren.